Welcome to Speed Data, quick conversations with cybersecurity leaders. I'm your host, Megan Garza. This week's episode is a continuation of my chat with Alexis Bonnell, U.S. Air Force Research Lab CIO. During our conversation, Alexis talked about the duality of successful leadership, the importance of empathy in the cybersecurity field, and shared what it means to be a cyber ally. If you missed part one of my conversation with Alexis, check out the full post at varonis.com/blog. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy part two of Speed Data featuring Alexis Bonnell. This week, I get to speak with U.S. Air Force Research Lab CIO Alexis Bonnell, who dubs herself the least likely IT leader, but whose past resume and prowess beg to differ. It's an honor to welcome you to Speed Data, Alexis.
Thanks so much for having me.
What is something that's underway for you right now that excites you about cyber?
I actually think one of the things that excites me a lot about what we're trying to look at on cyber is really security as a service. So, right now, a lot of times, again, when someone is navigating different kind of security options or cyber issues, we forget sometimes that it can feel really heavy. It can feel really hard. It can feel really overwhelming for people who maybe aren't cyber, professionals. And so I'm really working and diving in with the team to say, well, what would it look to change that experience? What would it look like to actually feel like you had kind of a digital ally, right? Or a cyber ally that could come in with you early and could kind of say, what are you trying to do? And how might we think about cyber? So I think, this digital ally model and really being able to meet kind of my customers or people with digital aspirations, where they are and be able to provide them that advice and that guidance and quite frankly, that friendship, right? Like really early on, instead of it being something that is a bit scary or dreaded, or they feel like might keep them up at night. I think really kind of flipping that script and saying, hey, how can we be involved from the very beginning? How can we make it fun? Goodness me, like cyber, can actually be fun. And trying to lean in on that from an experience standpoint is something that I have a lot of hypothesis around, and one of those wish us luck, because hopefully we'll make some great headway in that kind of security as a service.
I love that term, cyber ally.
Well, there's lots more where that came from, right? So come on by, meet your cyber allies,
I love it.
Corral.
What's one thing that you wish future cybersecurity professionals knew?
I think the role of future cybersecurity, and even right now, this is a really interesting time, right? Because if you think about it from, for example, a national security perspective, we really want to be two leaders, right? We want to be both the leader that is looking, in my case, to say, how do we maintain an unprecedented advantage against the adversary? And that is a very forward-leaning, really kind of risk-relevant type of question to be asking ourselves. And where, quite frankly, it's just going to be a constant competition, right? And so we have to be willing to be out there. I think at the same time, everyone is aware and no one wants to be on the front page, right, of the next cyber breach. And so I think that there is an inherent risk avoidance there. And so I think from a leader standpoint, one of the biggest elements that's going to impact us as cyber leaders, cyber professionals, is to say, where do I fall within that identity, right? How do I navigate at any given day that place where I need to be the aggressor and I need to be willing to take risk? Along with, the elements of doing that as well and right as I can within the best practices that we know. And I think the hard space here is that, quite frankly, the landscape changes every day, every minute. And so, I give myself the luxury of not expecting to be an expert in anything, because I think if you do, it's hard to keep up. So the question, I think, for many of us in cyber as well is, what is that balance between risk and mission? What is my role in navigating that? And then, quite frankly, how do I exercise kind of the moral imperative to always be looking for what's next while trying to navigate, kind of the current threat landscape or current compliance landscape? So in some ways, it's a little bit of an impossible role. So I have a lot of empathy for others like me that are trying to say, like, what does it look like to be good at this now?
And what made you want to go into cybersecurity?
I think for me, I understand that it's the other side of the coin. So as we want to lean in, as we need to do new and inventive and amazing things of amazing discovery, especially at a place like the Air Force Research Lab, it's also how do we do it well? How do we do it responsibly? And And I think that that is an interesting, almost like accountability loop, right, to find yourself in. And I think, for many of us that have to embody roles that are both about maintaining that advantage, but also maintaining responsibility. Quite frankly, I was really fascinated by the tension, right? And about what it would ask of me as a leader to kind of decide how I navigate that tension well. I made a kind of a joke and kind of not to our senior leadership that, this role is really terrifying, but I don't really take roles that don't terrify me anymore. So, I'm up to the challenge. But I have a lot of empathy and appreciation for other leaders in my organization, but other leaders in general that are really having to navigate, in some ways, what is a real identity question for us as cyber leaders.
Someone once told me that insider threats are what keep him up at night, and that's why they put him in charge of it.
It's interesting, right? Because someone has to be kept up at night, right? And so I think there's an element of which I wish more folks in the space would have an empathy, right? Especially for things like authorizing officials and other types of roles that, really are asked every day to take decisions of great kind of onus and weight. And at the same time, do that in a way that allows us to move quickly and nimbly. And I'll give you an example of that. I'm really fascinated in cyber. A lot of times as people are navigating it, sometimes it's kind of a final thing, right? That someone's navigating. Well, how do we secure this and how do we protect it? And I think there is an opportunity for us to actually, really bring that to the very beginning of the conversation and to say, well, when I'm looking to take advantage of this incredible technology, right? Or this digital, kind of advantage, what does it look like to think about that relationship with knowledge and to think about it as a security question as much as it is an advantage question from the very beginning? And it's one of the things I hope to bring to the role of, really bringing the cyber questions up into the early discovery stage where we have lots of enthusiasm and lots of energy and lots of curiosity and actually almost pre-solve some of those issues a bit earlier versus having them be things that have to be navigated, toward the end of a process.
And lastly, Alexis, if you weren't in cybersecurity, what would you be doing?
I would probably be taking, different properties and manifesting super fun spaces that people could do innovative work in. I think that's one of the interesting twists, right? Of oftentimes being in whether it's cyber or digital landscapes, so much of what you do is really around critical process and critical thinking. And you don't always get to manifest, real things that you see. It's like I've thwarted someone, but you don't get to kind of bear the sword, and do those types of elements. So I think for me, being able to do fun things where I see the physical results of them is the flip side of my identity coin.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed chatting with you today, Alexis. I know you are incredibly busy, and I appreciate you making time to speak with me. For our audience, if you have any questions you'd like me to ask on a future Speed Data episode, please email me at pr@varonis.com. Thank you again, Alexis.
Thanks so much.